there could be, we don't yet know, but there could be dimensions of space beyond those that we directly observe. So how should we think about that?
But that in fact we are embedded in a higher dimensional space. And string theorists on the frontier of this exercise are hypothesizing at least 10 dimensions to account for everything we see in the universe.
So the Big Bang could be a collision of the multiverse, a multiverse of universes.
Living in a multidimensional world is a trendy topic, and astrophysicists are often invited to business or scientific events to explain how we might be embedded in a multidimensional world. Before we look into some of these explanations, it is necessary to make a quick introduction about why we can, or we cannot see things. If humans can see any element in real life, it is because the same elements are part of the visible light. Visible light is actually a scientific term, as it is a segment of the electromagnetic spectrum. And the electromagnetic spectrum is the combination of electromagnetic radiations, that is the flow of energy traveling at the universal speed of light. In the electromagnetic spectrum, besides the visible light, there are other types of radiations, like radio waves, gamma rays, infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays. But the fact remains that the human eye can only detect the small portion of the spectrum called the visible light. There are also many elements that emit light or carry energy, but we can't see them. And this is because they are not part of the visible light segment. At the same time, there are things that don't emit any light, but we know are there, like dark matter. Extra dimensions of space could fall into this second category. We can't see them, but they are probably there, and we just don't know where, or what to look for. This is a problem that is frequently experienced by the community of scientists. Listen what Neil deGrasse Tyson has to say about this issue.
You have surrounding information for context. In my field, there are objects we've never seen before. There are things that defy any prior understanding of how to even ask questions about it.
Yes.
And so then you have to say, what kind of data should I be seeking out in this new phenomenon? And for me, that's the more interesting kind of data, because that enables future understanding that would not previously been empowered by data that you're just gathering because people are handing it to you for free, or handing it to you because of what they're doing or what they're otherwise thinking.
So how do we go about finding extra dimensions? In our daily life, we experience a three-dimensional space when we move left, right, forward, backward, up and down. And there are laws of physics that regulate these movements. But there could be other dimensions of space, beyond those that we observe directly. Lisa Randall is professor of theoretical particle physics and cosmology at Harvard University, and she develops and study models that investigate extra dimensions of space. Her first suggestion to those interested in investigating extra dimensions is to try not to picture them. Any attempt will be influenced greatly by what we know, and what we know is defined by our daily life, and by what we see in the visible spectrum. However, there have been simulations attempts in the past. And one of the most popular was presented in Flatland, a satire book published in 1884 by English schoolmaster Edwin A. Abbott. Lisa Randall explained Flatland during a presentation at a technology event organized by Tencent, one of the largest media companies in China.
And let's imagine for a moment that we were two-dimensional creatures in a three-dimensional world. How would we observe three-dimensional world? There's a lovely book called Flatland, which actually talked about that. And you would basically see slices. You could see things that came through. For example, you could imagine that a sphere came through what was known as Flatland, the two-dimensional universe. And what would you see if you lived on that plane that is Flatland? Well, you would see a series of disks that grew in size and then decreased in size as it passed through. So at any given moment, you wouldn't see the full three-dimensional object, but you would be able to put it together and realize something three-dimensional had been there. And in the same way, The fact that we live in 3 dimensions, if some 4-dimensional hypersphere came through, what would we see? We would see a series of spheres that increased in size and then decreased in size. And again, we would never see the 4-dimensional sphere in its entirety, but we'd be able to put it together.
Neil deGrasse Tyson gave also a more captivating description during an interview at 92Y in New York, while presenting his bestseller, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. Take a listen.
I'm at my desk, and the desk is a surface, okay? And I start putting pages down on the desk. I'm tiling them on the desk. And then I run out of room. I have exhausted the 2 dimensions of the surface of my desk. We have ways of accommodating this problem. And so we have page organizers that go upwards. So now when I don't have any more surface area of the desk, I can enter a 3rd dimension and put pages there. If you are an ant embedded in this 2-dimensional world of the surface of my desk, and you fill up the desk with these sheets of paper, the ant will say, there is no more room. And I say, yes, there is, watch me. And I take a piece of paper off the desk, put it in the page organizer, and according to the ant that's embedded in the 2 dimensions, that page disappeared. It disappeared into a dimension that ant does not have access to. What a brilliant invention this is. You can put practically an unlimited number of pages, far more pages above the desk than on the desk. So access to a 3rd dimension is an extraordinarily useful storage device for a 2-dimensional creature. Watch what happens next. I now have my 3-dimensional room, and I'm filling it with boxes. Now I've run out of space to put the boxes. But now a 4-dimensional alien looks at us and says, I got this. Just move it into the 4th dimension. What are you talking about? And the alien comes in, reaches in, takes one of the boxes, and then the box disappears. Disappears. It went into a 4th dimension. And this was captured in the film Monsters, Inc. Did you guys see this film? These are monsters that work in a door factory, and they make these doors, and they open the door, and it is the door of a kid's bedroom or their closet. And they step through, and they're in the kid's closet. And then they scare the kid, because that's their job. They're monsters, okay? This doorway is a portal through the 4th dimension and then back to the 3rd. So imagine a new storage system where you just go to Home Depot and buy a door. And that door is your portal to a 4th dimension. You open the door, put your boxes, close the door, you look on the other side of the door, there's nothing there. So this is what's going on when you have access to higher dimensions. Any dimension higher than the 3 that we're familiar with, or the actual 4 that we're embedded in, we live in a 4-dimensional world. And that might sound a little flaky or freaky, but consider the following fact. You have never met someone at a place unless it was also at a time. And you have never met someone at a time unless it was also at a place. That requires 4 dimensions of coordinates.
Wait.
We know intuitively that we need 4 dimensions to localize someone to meet up with them. Especially when, well, only 2 dimensions if you don't have tall buildings. You have tall buildings, you need the 3rd dimension. So you don't say, I'll meet you at the 20th floor of, on 721 Park Avenue. What time? Okay? There's a full 4 dimensions going on there. So just I want to convince you we live in a 4-dimensional world for that reason. Okay. It may be that these 4 dimensions are manifest to us, but that in fact we are embedded in a higher dimensional space. And string theorists on the frontier of this exercise are hypothesizing at least 10 dimensions to account for everything we see in the universe, even if we do not directly measure those dimensions themselves.
In string, the universe has no more than 11 dimensions. A new theory, called M-theory, requires one more dimension than the traditional 10. Beyond 11, the universe would become unstable, and dimensions higher than 11 would collapse back to an 11-dimensional universe. Here is a way to illustrate dimensions beyond the ones we are familiar with.
A point has no dimensions. There's no height, width, depth, so it has 0 dimensions. A line has 1 dimension, length. Okay? A square has 2 dimensions, sort of height and width. A cube has 3 dimensions, height, width, depth. We got this. Now follow me. A line is 1-dimensional, but it's bounded by 2 0-dimensional things. Those are the points. 1 dimension bounded by 2 0-dimensional points. A square is 2 dimensions bounded by 4 1-dimensional sides. A cube is 3 dimensions bounded by 6 2-dimensional sides. So in other words, the dimensions of your sides are going up. Your line is bound by 0-dimensional points. Your square is bound by 2-dimensional lines. I mean, by 1-dimensional sides. The cube is bound by 2-dimensional squares. Okay? So we're going up 2, 4, 6. 2 points, 4 sides of a square, 6 sides of a cube. And each side is 1 dimension less. They're squares on the sides of a cube. They're lines on the side of a square. They're dots on the sides of a line. Let's go up to a 4-dimensional cube. A 4-dimensional cube has 8 sides. A regular cube had 6 sides. We're going up by 2. A 4-dimensional cube has 8 sides. And each of those sides is a 3-dimensional cube. 1 dimension down from itself. In the same way, each side of a 3-dimensional cube is a 2-dimensional square. So when you get to 4 dimensions, the sides are 3-dimensional surfaces. And you can take this all the way up. And our brains can't picture what we call a hypercube, in some circles a tesseract. We can't picture a volume bounded by 3-dimensional cubes. What does it even mean? This is because we evolved in the plains of Africa, just not wanting to get eaten by a lion. Our neurosynapses are ill-equipped to do the distance on this. And this is why we invent mathematics that can take us there.
But today's mathematics is still not sufficient to give us all the answers. More importantly, it doesn't provide us with the tools to learn which questions we don't ask because we don't know what is out there. This is something that apparently keeps DeGrasse Tyson awake at night.
I'm going to give an answer, but then I want your permission to give you a kind of a cop-out answer. So I'll give both, a full answer and then a cop-out answer. My full answer is, I wonder if, in fact, the human intellect is sufficient to actually decode the full operations of this universe in which we live. And it's not specifically an astrophysical question, it's just more, we are an intelligent species because we defined ourselves that way. We don't have the benefit of another species to compare ourselves with, against whom we might fail miserably. And so when we compare ourselves to chimps, we sit up righteously and say, we have poetry and the Hubble telescope and philosophy, and the chimp just stacks boxes to reach a banana. Yet there's only 1% difference in our DNA. But then you'll say, what a difference that 1% makes. And I would say maybe that 1% DNA difference corresponds with an equally small difference in the intelligence between a chimp and humans. And you say, I can't believe that. No. Well, imagine some other species that visits us that's 1% along on that same scale, smarter than us. Consider, the smartest chimp does what our toddlers can do. And there's no way you will explain to a chimp, I'll have dinner ready at 6:30, can you pick up some juice on the way home? The simplest human thoughts are inconceivable to a chimp. And their talents are about what our toddlers can do. So let's get back to this 1% smarter alien that we've discovered. Corresponding this analogy, we now say, what would we look like to them? Well, they would roll Stephen Hawking forward after combing the human species, and they'd say, this one is slightly smarter than the rest because he can do astrophysics calculations in his head like little Timmy over here, who just came home from preschool. Oh, Timmy, you just composed 3 sonnets. Isn't that cute? Let's put it up on the refrigerator door. Oh, you just derived the fundamental law of calculus. Isn't that cute? Put it up on the refrigerator. Their simplest thoughts would transcend our deepest thoughts. And maybe to them, it is obvious what dark matter is and dark energy. Maybe to them, particles popping in and out of existence is a trivial exercise in their understanding of the multidimensional space-time continuum. We might not be smart enough to figure out a universe that could be trivial to the brain of a more intelligent species. And we are here groping at the sides of a wall, not knowing how tall, wide, or deep it is, because we have the limits of the human physiology evolved off the plains of Africa just to try to understand the entire universe. So I lose sleep on that question each night. Okay. So, may I now give you my cop-out answer? My cop-out answer is, I think often about the questions we do not yet know to ask because discoveries yet to come, but when they arrive, will put us in a new vista, a new place to stand, enabling us to see questions undreamt of and unimagined before we got there. So when I, again, lay awake at night, I ponder what kinds of questions lay beyond our reach. Because the questions that we even know how to pose, they're there. Those are not even interesting to me anymore because we knew how to ask the question. I want to know the question that is beyond everyone's reach. And by definition, I can't because we haven't gotten there yet. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't dream of that frontier.